Endurance Junkie Podcast, episode 40. Hey Junkie, welcome to another episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest, and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. From substance abuser to Ironman devotee, Lionel Sanders followed an extraordinary path to becoming an Ironman champion. The 26-year-old played practically every sport possible when growing up, finding early success in running. But by the time he hit high school, he had run so much he started to hate it, which is when he discovered the sort of partying that led him down a drug-induced spiral. Lionel, thanks for taking the time to chat here today. Now, for those of us who don't know you, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your sporting background growing up as a kid in Canada?
Sure. I'm 26 years old. As you said, I'm Canadian. I started off in running in grade 3, and I didn't have immediate success, but by grade 4, I remember the guy who was like super good at running. I thought he was the coolest guy in the world, and I wanted to be just like him. And by grade 4, I had sort of figured out how to run a bit quicker, and then I started to have a bit more success. And I basically ran every single year that I could. Since then, all of grade school, all of high school, and then I took 5 years of university. All of those years I've taken a university. As well, I was playing basketball. Often I was playing volleyball, badminton, soccer, a little bit of hockey. Being a Canadian, I had to play, and then I did a lot of BMX too on the side. But for the most part, running was always sort of what took up the most time, and was always my focus growing up.
So you do have a really strong endurance base from those running years.
I would definitely think so. I took a few years off when I was about 20 years old, 19 or 20 years old. And, the moment that I started running again, I was back running like a 40-minute 10K off of no training or anything. So, that I would definitely attribute that to having trained so much when I was younger, and then I would say, interestingly, looking back, the amount of BMX I was doing, I was literally biking everywhere. I lived in the county, and my school, for instance, was about 6 kilometers down the road, and I would bike all the time, that 6-7 kilometer bike ride. So, I would say that looking back, that probably has had an effect on my biking now as well.
Yeah. Those couple of years off that you mentioned before, I guess you're referring here to your party years.
I would. I guess that's a good way to put them. I was from. I definitely was partying while I was in school still, but after about 3 years of going down that sort of downward spiral, eventually I dropped out of university. I don't necessarily know if I did it on my own accord. I was using a student loan that my parents had given me, and eventually when they found out what I was using the money for, they pulled the student loan, and so I had no choice but to not go back to school. And I took 2 years off at that point and basically just continued down on my downward spiral, I'd say even more rapidly. And then after 2 years or so of that, eventually I saw the light, and I got back into running.
Yeah, because it wasn't really just partying; it was actually full-on drug and alcohol abuse, right?
I would definitely say that it started off as partying, and as just in high school and that sort of thing, just trying to have a good time, and everyone else was doing it, so why not? I'll do it as well. And over time, I'm sure someone from the outside looking in could probably see that I was doing it a bit harder than most of the people around me, and it was having a bit more pronounced effect on me, the negative effects. And so then when I really got out on my own into university and was living on my own, my use of drugs and that sort of thing started to escalate into harder drugs and more frequently. And then, I remember saying to myself, "Oh, I'll never do drugs alone." And then, eventually I was starting to do them alone, and then I was doing them a lot alone, and then I was doing them most of the time alone. And so, it just sort of, I guess, was my personality. It just sort of, I guess, aided towards getting into it progressively harder and harder and harder and harder until I hit rock bottom several times, and then eventually I hit a rock bottom that I thought was, there is no further bottom than here, and that was when I really decided to turn my life around, and that's right around the time when I really got serious about triathlon.
So just some random event that actually made you turn your life around and made you decide to just pick up running again?
The event that really did it for me is I had, for some odd reason, decided not to party one weekend, and I was living in a place where we were partying often, and I was just in my room, and I remember walking out, get a drink or something, and everyone was out in the living room partying, and they were telling each other how much they love each other and hugging each other and all that sort of stuff. And then 20 minutes later or so, I hear some yelling out from the living room, and I come out to see what's going on, and all of a sudden there's like almost a fist fight happening in my living room because they had run out of drugs, and they were saying, "Well, who are we going to call? We got to call someone. Come on, man, get on the phone, call your buddy." And they were literally about to fight each other for it, and that was a very, very common occurrence for us, but that was the first time where I ever really sort of saw what I must look like in the moment. I remember times where I thought, when there was a little, let's say a line left on the table, and I looked at it, and I look around the table at everyone, and I'm thinking to myself, I'd kill these guys for that right now. And so that was the time when I really realized, wow, this is who I've become. This is what I must look like from an outside's perspective. And that really hit me hard. And, I decided the next day, that's it. I'm not gonna party anymore. And I started running about 2 or 3 days later. That was something that was familiar to me, something that I thought was healthy, and something I could devote myself to. And so that's what I began doing, from then on. And I won't say that I haven't used drugs since then. I certainly had a relapse or two along the way. But that was certainly the moment when I really decided that it was time to change.
So you think you're someone who's pretty prone to addiction, and maybe now sport is your new addiction?
That's certainly been something that I've been conscious of. For instance, when my coach first contacted me, my current coach first contacted me, that was the first thing he said, are you just addicted to this? And if something goes wrong here, are you just going to turn to another addiction, for instance? And I've certainly, in the beginning stages, I'd say yes, I definitely was going from one addiction to another. And, I look at it as, hey, who cares? It's better to be addicted to this than to that. But I certainly am trying to grow as a human being and mentally and spiritually. And I'd say I've come to a point now where I'm now no longer addicted to triathlon, no longer using it as sort of like a medication almost. If I lost the use of my legs, for instance, I think I'd be all right. I enjoy sport. I'd get into some other sport. So I've been very, very conscious of that, and have really tried to not attach myself in a maladaptive way to triathlon. And I think I've come to a point now where I'm there, it's no longer a maladaptive attachment.
This has been basically a pretty short ride, from starting running again. I think it was 2009 to now your second year as a pro triathlete. What eventually made you get on that triathlon path? As I said, I started running about a couple days after that experience. That experience was something like November 1st or something, 2009. And then I started running again on November 5th, 2009. Interestingly, I don't know why, but I began keeping a log of my runs from then, and I have an unbroken record of all the workouts I've done since then. And so I was running for about a month, and I still was feeling pretty crappy. And with hindsight, I now understand why I had depleted my dopamine stores
And so they take, if after hard drug use, for instance, they can take up to 6 months to replenish themselves. And so, but anyways, I didn't know that, and I felt like I needed something else. And strangely, the idea of doing an Ironman triathlon popped into my head, and I have really no idea where it popped into my head from. I didn't know anything, like, even though I'm Canadian, like I had no idea of Simon Whitfield and winning the Olympic gold in 2000, and I had never, that I remember, or saw the Ironman on TV or anything, so I really don't know where it came from. But I Googled it and researched it a bit, and I was like, wow, that's something super hard, and seems like just what I need to turn my life around. And so I got on the telephone and asked my mom for a credit card number if she'd front me the money to sign up for it, because I think it was like $650, and I wasn't even able to pay my rent at the time. And she was like, man, that's like super hard. You know that, right? Like you're kind of crazy. And I was like, yeah, that's the whole point. It is super hard. And I think if I devote myself to this endeavor, that, it'll help me turn my life around. And so that was the moment. She ended up giving me her credit card number, and I typed it in, and I enrolled in Ironman Louisville, which was, I think, something like August 29th, 2010. And from then on, that became sort of my life purpose, was to train for that race and then eventually go to Louisville and complete it.
Now, did you want to do it just for the experience and do it once, and were you hooked afterwards, or was it always the plan to see how far you could go in the sport?
Oh, in the beginning, it was no awareness of anything of that nature. Most definitely, I was just doing it as a way. In the very, very initial stages, it was just an excuse to tell my friends that I wasn't coming out tonight. Sorry, I'm training, or I've got to wake up tomorrow morning, so I can't go out and party tonight. And then as I started to become more secure with myself, then I definitely started to get back. Like, I started to do local running races, and then I started to say, hey, I wonder how fast I could get. And I remember getting close to 32 minutes in the 10K that year. And then I started thinking, well, hey, maybe I could break 32 minutes in the 10K. And so yeah, I'd say after about 5 months of training, then I started to think, I'm kind of enjoying this. And then I did my first sprint triathlon in May of 2010, and I think I was like almost last place out of the water. I was something like 5 or 6 minutes down from the lead swimmer. And so that's when I realized that I was a poor swimmer. And so then I started to say, well, I got to improve my swimming. And so I hired a coach for an hour and did like an underwater video thing and gave me some tips. And then eventually, once the Ironman came around in August, I had improved my swimming down to like a 1:15 or so for the 3.8 kilometer swim, which was a huge improvement from my first swim. And after the race, though, then I started, when I got lapped by Paul Ambrose, who eventually went on to win the race that year, Ironman Louisville. And I think the seeds were planted then that I had the desire to become a professional triathlete, because I thought the dude was just so cool when he passed by, and I just did not understand how he was going so fast. And so, yeah, eventually that did become the goal and the dream.
Yeah. Eventually, yeah, it didn't really take you that many years, because September 2013, you had your first win as a pro at 70.3 Muskoka. Where you beat Andreas Raylert. What was it like, and what did it mean for you to beat a guy like that?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't all smooth in sailing all the way till then. My swim has always been my weakness, and along the way, for instance, I came to my hometown of Windsor, Ontario, and I had been training pretty hard for about 2 years up until then, and I came here, and one of our Canada's top Olympic distance triathletes showed up. He ended up being the Olympic alternate in 2012, and he beat me by 6 minutes out of the water. And this was only 1 year before Muskoka, and so you can only imagine how bad that is for your confidence. And even at the start of 2013, I was thinking to myself, I don't really think I have what it takes to be a triathlete. Maybe I could be a good duathlete. Maybe I could do decently well on the national running scene. But I told myself, 2 more years, I'm going to give this, trying to work on my swim, and then I'll see. And I enrolled in a race in June of 2013, and I came only a minute back out of the water on a pretty good swimmer. And so then that's when I said, okay, I'm going to see how I can do at the 70.3 distance, just because of the proportion of swimming to biking to running was more in favor of myself as a weak swimmer. And so, yeah, when I was training for that race from June until September, I definitely thought I had a chance at winning. And then when I saw the start list 2 weeks before the race and I saw Andreas's name on it, I thought, oh my God, there's just no way, like, second place is going to have to do for you. This guy's the fastest guy to ever do the long distance race. You're pretty arrogant to think that you're going to beat this guy. And so, I went into it with the intention of I've got nothing to lose. If I do well against him, it'll be great. And if I don't do well, hey, he's the best. He's the fastest guy ever. So who cares? Like, he's the best. It doesn't look that bad on you. That's the way I raced the whole race. And I swam decently well, and then I biked decently well, and I ended up actually passing Andreas on the bike. I didn't know, though. I passed him at about 50 miles, and on his butt it said Andy. And I thought to myself, could that have been Andreas? I said, there's no way. And then I was getting time splits at about, I should say 50K, not 50 miles. And then at about 50 miles or so, I was getting a time split, and the people were yelling at me, oh, he's up there. He's not too far ahead. He's a minute 15 up on you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm only a minute 15 down on Andreas. This is the best race ever. And then I ended up getting off the bike, and I found out it wasn't him. So it was a bit anticlimactic, but yeah, it was. I was running scared the whole time, right till the finish. I knew he was coming for me on the run. So then to finish, and then to see him at the finish line and chat with him, and he told me all about, like, racing Kona and stuff, and it was a really, really cool experience.
Yeah, it must have been also a nice way to finish off the season there, and setting yourself up for the 2014 season, which has been pretty amazing for you. You had I think you almost podiumed at every race that you did this year, with wins at 70.3 Muncie and Racine and Steelhead, and second places at 70.3s in Raleigh and Syracuse. How can you stay so consistent when you race so often?
Well, interestingly, I'd say the most important race of the year for me was 70.3 St. George, where I finished 18th, and it was absolutely devastating for me because, I had done this good race in Muskoka not too long before, and then I went to this race thinking, you know what, I can compete with the best guys in the world. And then I get there, and I had a bad swim, I had to continue to have a bad bike, and then I didn't run very well. And I ended up finishing 10 minutes behind Jan Frodeno, the eventual winner of the race, and then in 18th place. And then I was thinking to myself after the race, I'm like, there's just no, how can you make up 10 minutes? Like, I didn't bike that poorly. I didn't run that poorly. And that's when I started to question myself again, like, wow, there's just no, like, I don't think you have what it takes to really compete with these guys at the highest levels anyway. And that's when I actually messaged a few of my close advisors and told them, I don't think I should be competing internationally. I think I should only compete domestically. And they're like, well, keep at it, keep persevere. And so I went back in my training logs, and I did a good hard analysis, and I started to see some trends actually that had sort of I had done into that race that I, for instance, hadn't done into Muskoka, where I had a good race. And so I started to have like a hypothesis of why I didn't race up to the level I thought I was capable of. And so it was through that analysis that I started to apply what I learned. And then obviously going into Raleigh, I hadn't proven the hypothesis yet. But Raleigh sort of gave some strength to what those things that I thought I had done wrong. And then Syracuse, once again, I sort of added strength to my theory. And then, but one thing that I was missing is I didn't have a power meter, and I felt like that was like a big issue. One of the I's or T's that I hadn't dotted or crossed. And so I got a power meter, and then I think everything started to come together at Muncie, and then I started to get in a good rhythm. but I would attribute a great deal of the consistency to logging everything that I've done. And then when I didn't race up to the level that I thought capable, I went back and I looked into what I was doing, and you know, I did find some patterns, and then I just continued to learn. Every race I did, I always tried to learn something from it and take something away. And every single race throughout the entire season, I always had learned at least one or two things that I then applied once again to the next race. And I think that's what really made me consistent.
Yeah. The only important race then where you didn't podium was the 70.3 World Champs, where you came fourth, behind guys like Gomez and Frodeno. You mentioned him before, and Tim Don. So behind those guys, fourth place is definitely not a shame. How did you feel after that race? Did you then feel that you were able to compete against these guys?
Well, that entire race was just completely surreal because, like, first off, I came out of the water in last place. Which was a very humbling experience. Like I had kind of in the back of my head thought, like, I mean, this is a very strong field. It is possible that you could come in last, but I didn't think that it would actually happen. So then when I came out of the water and I looked at my bike and it was the only bike left in the rack, it was a very humbling experience. And at that point I was like, well, you got nothing to lose now. Who cares? Like, if you go out and super hard on the bike and blow up, no one's going to care. No one's ever going to say anything. You came last out of the water. Like, there's nothing that you have to lose. So that's what I did. It was a controlled hard. It was sort of the upper limit of power that I thought that I could hold on the bike and still have a chance at running well. So that's what I did on the bike. And then I got off, and on the run, I think I came off the bike in like 11th place or something. And I just continued to run as hard as I could. And then by the I think it was something like 18 kilometers, I started to pull guys back in. And sorry, my dog is in here. And then guys really started to come back to me with about 4 kilometers to go, and so that was super motivating, and I really went hard. And then coming down that finishing chute, man, it was in my home country, so I slapped by with probably 200 people, and my ears were ringing. It was so loud, and it felt like I was on the Tour de France or something, with like a very steep cobble steps going into the final 200 meters or so. And then to cross the finish line and literally have when I was first starting to train, I had a poster of Jan Frodeno up on the wall. So to come into the finish line, and then there's Gomez, who just won the world championship last weekend, who I was watching on the ITU broadcast. Just to shake these guys' hands was totally worth the pain of the race that beforehand. So it was an absolute amazing experience from start to finish.
Cool. So with that in mind, that great race, what were your expectations going into Ironman Florida, which was going to be your Ironman debut as a pro?
Florida was something special for me because that's how I got into triathlon, and that has always been where I've wanted to go. Once I really devoted myself and said I want to become a pro triathlete, this was going to be sort of my return to try and see if I had what it takes to be a long distance triathlete. And so, the 70.3 is most definitely, like, I love to race and I just love doing the sport, but this was more personal to me. So, I really, even going into the race, I told my coach, I'm like, oh man, I'm just not in the shape that I'd like to be. And I know it was in good shape, and I probably could have done a decent Ironman like a week or two after 70.3 Worlds. Like I train on fairly high mileage to begin with, so but just because it was such a personal thing for me, I didn't feel that I was in very good shape for the race, at least to my own standards. I had come down with the flu about 2 weeks before, and as when you get sick, sometimes you start to panic, and when you're not doing the training that you had planned. But I tried to look at it as just sort of a blessing in disguise, and I was getting a bit of extra rest. And so, the training wasn't ideal, but I definitely felt like I had a shot at going for the win. I knew I was going to have to hold. Originally, I thought Andrew Starkowicz was going to be in the race, and I knew he had went 7:55 the year before, setting the bike course world record for the 180K. And so, I knew I was going to have to be on top of my game, but I thought if I had a good swim and I biked to the best of my ability, and then ran very, very hard and went deep into the pain, that I'd have a shot anyway.
Yeah. So, yeah, when they canceled the swim, I think you guys were already in the water at the time. I guess that wasn't really a bad plan for you, being maybe not the strongest swimmer of the pack. How did you react to that decision that the swim was canceled, and how did it affect your race plan?
It was massively disappointing because, the first thing that popped into my head the moment I found out, like, I was out there swimming, and then I could just tell from the body language of the guys around me that they had canceled the swim. And the first thing I thought is, if you win this thing, people are all going to doubt it. It's not going to mean the same if you had won it with the swim. And so I was disappointing. It was very, very disappointing from that perspective because I certainly was going there to win a swim bike run. Mm-hmm. So and that's what I had prepared myself for. That's what I had prepared myself to suffer for. And so it was hugely disappointing. But the goal is always and has been always and continues to be Kona. And so I looked at it as a good experience nonetheless, and it was always just going to be a good experience for me. And so it actually didn't change my game plan whatsoever. I had a particular wattage zone on the bike that I intended on holding, which was initially it was 300 to 310 watts. And then when they canceled the swim, normally I'd have let's say between 6 and 8 minute deficit to overcome. Since I'd have no deficit to overcome, I decided to increase that zone by 10 watts and find out what happens. So I increased it. So I allowed myself to hold anywhere between 310 and 320 watts on the bike. And then my intention was to basically make as many mistakes as I possibly could. And so that meant for me, when I hopped off the bike, I was intending on holding 340 per kilometer for as long as I possibly could. And that's what I ended up doing, even though the swim was canceled.
Yeah, cool. So, yeah, do you feel you have some unfinished business there with Ironman, or is that just, a learning curve for you?
I most definitely need to do another one now. It's just, I don't have a time. My big goal was to break 8 hours. And I didn't get a chance at that. Well, I did, I guess, in a sense, but it's not a legitimate sub 8 hour race. So I have to do another one. It's eating away at me right now. I definitely want to. I wish it wasn't in the plan for me to do Arizona, though I was enrolled in it. I was only going to do it if I got a double flat or something at Florida. So I didn't end up going to do the race, and it was very difficult for me not to buy a plane ticket and go do it. But I most definitely have unfinished business there that I probably will finish off at Ironman Texas on May 16th.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been just over a month since Florida, and you've had some downtime, and you're now easing back into training. So yeah, you mentioned Ironman Texas. What else is on the plan for 2015? You gonna race as many 70.3s as you did last year?
Definitely not. I'm gonna try it now. I think I've got enough points between 70.3 Worlds and the Ironman Florida race that I should be in previous years anyway. I have enough points for Kona, so that's most definitely the big goal for 2015. I'll do Ironman Texas as you said, to finish off some business, to learn some more lessons, and then I'm going to try my first little run in Europe. I'm going to go to ITU Long Distance World Championship. And then if I'm still feeling good, I'm thinking about doing Challenge Roth. And then probably from then on, after that race, I'll take 2 weeks or so of sort of downtime, just trying to rejuvenate a bit. And then for the rest of the summer, I'll focus on training for Kona.
Yeah. Well, if I can give you one advice, is definitely do that Challenge Roth race. It's just amazing.
It's my biggest bucket list race. So I told my coach we had a deal that if I won Florida, he'd let me do Challenge Roth. So that was the first thing I said to him when I saw him, is I'm doing Challenge Roth.
All right, cool. All right, thanks very much for your time, Lionel. How can people get in touch with you if they want to?
I'm on Twitter my handle is @LSandersTry. I have a blog that I do. I do some videos. I do try and think of some fun things to do every now and then. That is www.lsanderstry.com. And those are the sort of main things to get in touch.
All right, cool. Definitely make sure to put those links in the show notes on the podcast website.
Cool, man. Thank you.
Feel free to give some love to your sponsors.
Yeah, well, I got quite a few of them who have been around for since the beginning. Actually, since most of them since before Muskoka, so I'm very honored to have them on board. Louis Garneau for bike and clothing and helmets and shoes, and Cycle Culture, my bike shop, and I've had some financial support from a doctor around town, Richard Najou, and my triathlon club, C3 Kinetico. Have helped me out since 2010, and Saucony shoes, and I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, but I'm very grateful for all of their support from the beginning.
All right, excellent. Anything else you want to plug?
No, that's it, man. Thank you. I appreciate for having me on.
All right, no, my pleasure. It's been an awesome chat, and enjoy the build up to Texas, and definitely looking forward to what you will do in Kona next year.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Cheers, man.
See ya.